Hi, everyone. Welcome to Built to Last, Creating and Nurturing Thriving Spaces. In the title on Whova, it says specifically for young people, but I left that piece out of the slide intentionally because I firmly believe and know that what we're going to move through today can be applied in any space and with any community, any people, any population that you work with or that you're in relationship with. So thanks for joining. My name is Steph. My pronouns are they and she series. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself before I jump into the content itself. And the reason why I do this is because all of my identities impact the work that I do, and it impacts and informs the way that I do this work. And so sharing this is also modeling what I think speaks to authenticity and creating a safe, thriving, brave space with all people, right? When we share parts of ourselves, then we say, hey, here are the ideas that I walk with, here are the privileges that I hold. We are naming things that folks can sometimes see and can't see, and that speaks to safety. So I am Puerto Rican. I am from the Bronx in New York. Most of my, all of my identities are just fluid as fuck. Like that's just what it is. When I think about sexual orientation, romantic orientation, gender identity, all of those things are just fluid to me. I like to identify as an educator from the block. And what I mean by that is not like a shout out to J-Lo kind of thing. It's got nothing to do with Jenny. It's actually because for the first, I would say 9 years of my career as a sex educator, I was really put in these nonprofits, they just put you in this box of professionalism and they tell you how to talk and how to be and how to do all the things. And most of what I was, forced to really do and to emulate and behave as wasn't true for who I was, and it wasn't true for the communities that I was working with, let alone a part of. So when I say educator from the block, what I'm saying is that the language that I'm going to use today, the ways that I'm going to speak, even the presentation that I'm going to move you all through is deeply personal and deeply close to my heart. And none of the language that I will be using is heavily academic. So this is not like you need to have a PhD kind of course. I'm not throwing SAT words at folks. I'm speaking in what is home to me. And so that may be slang, it may be Spanglish, I may curse here and there. This is just who I am, and this is the language and the way that feels best and safest for me to be able to educate and really get the information out there. So as I said, they and she series pronouns. I am a person with white privilege. Yes, Boricua, yes, absolutely, but still holding white privilege. And it's important to name that, for me at least, when I move and enter into any space, right? I always want to be able to say that one of the biggest reasons why I am so successful at doing this work the way that I do it is because of my white privilege. And that's just the fact, right? It's not something that we have to argue about or push back against. It just is what it is. This is the world that we live in. And so to deny that would be a lie. To deny that would be to deny the lived experience of Black folks and brown folks. And I'm just not going to do that. I'm also neurodivergent, so that may show up throughout our session. It may look like a bird flying by my window and my ADHD takes me and I'm like, oh, bird. It may look like me fidgeting with toys just to get myself in a state of calm, right? Or just the ability to focus. I may completely space on something that I am super skilled in, and that is okay, because all the information that you need is on the slides anyway. And folks always have the opportunity to email me and request a copy of my slides. I'm super happy to send that along. My last identifier is the unprofessional professional. And when I started working for myself, this is really where I started to unlearn and challenge professionalism in all of these spaces. And so an unprofessional professional is really just a person who chooses to practice as their authentic self, refusing to conform to white supremacy masqueraded as professionalism. White supremacy, professionalism hurt all of us. They hurt all of us. They try to limit all of us, right? And so with this identifier and just me being able to do things my way, I'm holding that I am hella skilled in what I do. I've been doing this for over 10 years now, and I do it my way. I do it in a way that feels good for me. And so it may not be traditionally what folks think of when they have an educator or they expect an educator to come and do lectures and trainings, but this is who I am. I'm also the founder of the SLAM conference. SLAM is a virtual sex ed conference that really only centers and hires BIPOC educators. And the reason for this is because if you look into the history of reproductive health and even sex education, if you look at birth control, all of these things have horrific ties to BIPOC communities being used and studied and abused. And so for me, it only made sense if I was going to host a virtual sex ed conference that I would censor the folks who are most impacted by this. And so that is SLAM. If you have any questions, if you want to check us out, I'll have all the information at the end of my slides. Session expectations. Please understand that I am learning from you as you are learning from me. This is a collaborative experience. I have the chat open on a separate window, so I am going to be able to interact with you and see all the beautiful things that you all have to say. And again, this is modeling what we're going to talk about later, but this notion that true learning really is a collaborative experience. It's not just me teaching at you, me saying I know all the things, because I don't. It's me saying I have some information and I know you've got some information too, and I'm super down to hear yours, and hopefully you are down to hear mine. We're going to have some Q&A at the end, hopefully. I know we had a little bit of tech issues, so time is a little sus right now. But any questions that y'all have, please throw them in the chat throughout the session. I have a lovely moderator, Princess, who's going to be pulling them out and holding them for us. This is not a one and done type of thing, right? Learning and unlearning, all of the things take more than just one session. And so I say that to set folks up with a realistic expectation of, no, this session is not going to fix everything. It's just not. You're not going to get out of this session or switch into the next one and say, aha, I figured it all out. I know how to do all the things. I'm an expert in this now. It's just not going to happen. I'm one person. This is 1 hour. It's not possible. And so please hold that as we move through the material. And then lastly, if you do want to request a copy of my slides, there's my email address, stephaniespeakshere@gmail.com. And you can get that again at the end. Bet. So let's go. So this is me, this little queer baby over here. I have been working with young people since I was a young people, particularly working with BIPOC youth, working with queer BIPOC youth. Those have always been where I find myself most at home, being with community who I'm an active part of. And so what I'm going to move through today is really all of my learning over 10, 11, 12 years of doing this work specifically with young people. And so what I love about working with young people is that they're always themselves. They are, or I'll say they're almost always themselves, right? Because it does depend on the environment that we've created, that we've nurtured for them and with them. But working with young people gave me the opportunity to really see myself being inauthentic. And that has an impact on a person, right? When you can see how free young people are in your presence, but then you are in the presence of your team or your supervisors, and you're like, oh no, I can't actually be myself. This is not who I am. And young people will almost always tell you what they really think or how they really feel about a thing. And it may not always feel good, but they're advocating for themselves, right? And so even if we have, this lovely Post-it note that someone left on my desk, this shit blows fiercely, I could have taken this and been like, how dare you, right? Like, you don't know shit, you don't know what you're talking about. That's not true. They know their experience. They know what they're talking about because this moment, this class, or whatever the lesson was, impacted them in a way where they felt they had to communicate this way. And so rather than belittling a young person and negating their experience or their opinion or their feelings, we learn to accept it and move with it and move through it. And that really is the heart of this session. As I said in the beginning, this stuff, one of my identifiers, or, like you have to say, oh, I'm a sex educator. But the other thing that I say is that I'm a space creator. And the reason that I say that is because doing work this way with this level of intentionality is applicable anywhere and everywhere, okay? It is very much Shakira, whenever, wherever, right? Bringing intentional building, nurturing into a space is not just a work thing. It is what I do with my best friends. It's what I do with people that I meet at conferences. It's what I do with my partners all the time. So please, as we're moving through the material, try to connect some of this stuff to your personal life, not just your professional life. Because I found that when you blend those two, that's really where the growth and the magic happens. All right, so I was actually really confused about what thriving meant when this word became like a buzzword, right? It was nowhere at first, and then it became just like, we want to thrive, and the nonprofit that I was working at would say this a lot, right? To the employees, to the young people, we want to create a thriving space. Yes, amazing. And no one ever described what does that mean? What is a thriving space? Please help me to understand. So when I Googled it, this is really what I got, right? Like folks doing mountain climbing, rock climbing. Oh, we did it, yes. And then this thing of a flower growing through concrete. Like, so this was what I got when I looked up what is thriving and how does that connect to the work that we're doing. In my brain, you know, I'm 33 and I love this movie. So in my brain, when I heard thriving, I'm like, okay, 30, flirty, and thriving. Absolutely. And the reality is that none of these things actually speak to my definition of thriving. So there's no wrong way to define a thriving environment because it is a deeply personal thing. But as you are all here to learn from me right now, I'm going to give you what thriving is to me. So thriving is an environment that intentionally and continuously creates opportunity, structure, and support for growth. Sorry, I lost my mouse on my other screen for a second. So when I think about thriving, and as I do the work that I do and just live the way that I live, it doesn't ever come down to numbers or deliverables or pre-test and post-test. It's got nothing to do with any of that, to be honest with you. For me, it comes down to these two things. It feels like, right? Or it feels, and I know I am. And this is where a lot of folks were like, well, I can't do that because it's not a measurable thing. I can't help you with that. The way that your place of business or work decides to measure success and growth and thriving is just the way that it is. But I am telling you that numbers very rarely have anything to do with this environment that is intentional, that is creating opportunity and structure and support for growth. So it feels safe, right? A thriving environment feels safe. A thriving environment feels supported, right? People there know that they're supported. Something has happened. There's been intentional communication, activities or something, but I know that I'm supported when I'm in this space. And I know that I'm held when I'm in this space, right? It feels like I am held in this space. So when I think about really healthy, happy partnerships and relationships, they also feel just like this. I feel safe, I feel supported, and I feel held. That does not mean that things are always perfect and butterflies and sunshine, because that's not realistic, but it does mean that I know I'm safe, supported, and held here. A thriving environment is focused on the experience, right? The feelings and the well-being of those that are in the space. It is not focused on the program, deliverables, or measures of success. Now, so I've told you what a thriving environment is, and we're going to talk about how to get there. But the first step is that it starts with you. Any work that I do, or almost any work that I do, especially these days, folks will usually hear me say that it starts with them. And some people get upset about that because they're like, just give me the steps. Just tell me the things to say to the young people or whoever I work with. And that's it. I don't want to reflect. I don't want to have to do the self-work. I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Self-work is, it is important. And it's rewarding, and it actually reflects the exact environment and the work that we do. It talks about intentionality, it talks about the integrity, right? And so this is, again, where I struggle with professionalism, because professionalism has put so many of us in a place where we leave ourselves out. So then why would we want to do the self-work? I get it, I hear you. And it doesn't always have to be like that. It's not always gonna be like that. I've been doing this for over 10 years and I have seen some change, okay? So I know that it's not always going to be the way that it once was. And that really only happens when we decide to really get to know ourselves and to come into awareness with our privileges, with our biases, with the things that we don't know, with the things that we want to know, all of that. So starting with you, I'd like to ask folks to utilize the chat box and tell me a little bit about expectations that you have or that the world may have, right? It doesn't have to be you specific. Could be you, could be your friend, could be your coworker, could be some teacher that you had in second grade. But what are the expectations that we typically have of young people that we're in space with? Can be things like, what is appropriate behavior? I would love to know, what is appropriate behavior to you? What language? How did that happen? Somebody just drew a line. That was cool. um, to be paying attention. Yeah. And how do we know? Like, how do we know someone's paying attention, right? Like, what does that look like? No cell activity, right? Put that phone away. My mom used to tell me all the time, get off that damn phone. It's because you're always on that computer all the time. Eye contact. Oof, yes, eye contact. Expected to be holding still. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes. God forbid we should have to fidget or shift or move, or we want to stretch our bodies. What about expression? Expect them to be looking up, not doing anything else, right? We're not allowed to fidget, absolutely not allowed to draw. Oh my gosh, do you remember getting in trouble for doodling? No, that's terrible. Vivian, talk to me nice, Vivian. Yes, calladita se ves más bonita. So when you're quiet, you're prettier. When you're quiet, you are the ideal young person, you're the ideal daughter, you're the ideal student, whatever. What does respect mean? So when I do this workshop, a lot of what I hear from adults is, I just want them to respect me. I just, as long as I'm being respected. Like, what does that mean? What does respect look like? Because I think it looks very different for each of us. Let's see, the expectation that the adult knows more or knows best. Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, I'm so excited for this session. Hell yeah, absolutely. And so the reality is that most of these expectations, yes, sorry, I have to read this one out. Expected not to show emotions of frustration or anger towards authority. Yikes. Yikes. Do we know that this notion of withdrawing from emotion, right, detaching from emotion or shaming folks for having emotion, do we know that this is written as one of the characteristics of white supremacy? To deny the emotionality of the human experience is absolutely absurd. But somehow when we work with young people who typically, right, developmentally don't have the same access or ability to control those things, to be an awareness of those things, we're like, how dare you? How dare you? But you're also upset right now. Like, it's the same thing. It's that Spider-Man meme where we're all just like, it's the same thing. It's the exact same thing. And so most of the expectations, or I could even argue that all of the expectations that we have of young people that we're in space and relationship with actually have really little to do with the work, the content, or what we're striving toward. It really has more to do with performativity. That's what we're asking for most young people in our spaces. Perform in a way that shows me ego, that's ego. Perform in a way that shows me that you are paying attention to me. It's not even perform in a way that shows me you value the thing that's happening, because if we talk about value, then we're having honest conversations, right? Where a young person can say, I don't care about this thing. This means nothing to me. But that's not what we're asking. It's quite literally fall in line in the ways that I know that I'm not going to have to hear shit from my supervisor or my program deliverable or my grant manager, right? And so this expectation is asking folks, asking young people, even asking yourselves to be inauthentic. And that is harmful. That is really, really harmful. A thriving environment requires collaboration. As April said, there is no space for superiority nor adultism that is masqueraded as best interest, right? I know best. I know best. I'm doing this because I love you, okay? This is going to hurt me a lot more than it hurts you. What are we talking about? So we move through spaces this way. We create spaces this way with young people. And then we wonder why they're rolling their eyes, why they don't want to engage, why aren't they more present, why aren't they more transparent? You're not asking them to be themselves. You're asking them to be who you want them to be. And I get it, because the world does that to us too, right? The world, the workplace, partners, parents, all of it. Most of the world will ask us to be who they want us to be, to fit into meeting their needs and their wants. But we have to move into a space where we can disrupt that, challenge it, come into awareness of it if we really want to support people thriving. We have to go beyond what we've been doing. One of the ways that we can talk about creating a safer, nurturing space really starts with you. And what I mean by that is, as you're asking yourself all of the questions about your expectations and you're assessing them, does this really matter, right? I've done lectures where I've actively told young people, listen, if you don't want to pay attention, I don't take it personal. That's okay. That's totally fine. Or if you want to pay attention, but maybe you want to lay your head down, you want to close your eyes, do those things. 9 times out of 10, those are the young people who have the most to say and the highest level of engagement when you meet them where they're at. So to meet them where they're at, we want to ask questions. You have to get curious. How do you best feel addressed? What helps you to be present in a space? How do you best feel addressed? That means that I am asking not just your name, but like, what actually feels good for you? I've had young people who said, my name doesn't bother me, but it would feel so good and so affirming to be called Love. So in this space, my name is Love. That took nothing out of me. I didn't lose the class. I didn't lose my curriculum. I lost nothing. And that young person got to feel affirmed in their identity. So what helps you to be present in a space? That looks different for everyone. And so really we want to ask these questions with intentionality, with the goal and the purpose of actually following up, right? We don't want to just ask these questions of people and say, okay, great, thanks, I got that, and then just kind of kick it to the side. We want to be intentional of asking these questions and following up with it. So if someone tells me, it's hard for me to be present in a space when I'm hungry, doesn't that? We all get hangry, yet sometimes we expect young people to forget their needs, their wants, and just do what we want them to do. That's adultism right there. That's saying, you don't know what you need right now. What you need is to learn from me. But my stomach is growling. I haven't eaten all day. It can't work like that. We want to ask about accessibility needs, right? We don't all have the same abilities. We do not. And you don't know that until you start asking these questions. There are different disabilities that sometimes are visible, and there are ones that are invisible. There are disabilities that impact folks' learning style, that impact folks' mobility. And we don't know that until we're asking the question. So what do you need? What helps you to be present in a space? What are the cultural differences that I may not be aware of that we have presently happening? April, you talking to me? Yes, sometimes we don't even know what we need. And that's exactly why I said that this session is deeply personal and it applies to every relationship and every space. Ask yourself these questions. I'm assuming most supervisors are not asking like what helps you to be present in a space, but I'm asking you to do this for yourself too. Sometimes it makes it easier for us to offer this to young people once we've offered it to ourselves. So please remember that creating really does start with you. So how do you feel about participating and speaking out loud? This is super, super important because not everyone is comfortable with that. Not everyone has found their voice, let alone feels power or comfort or safety in using that voice. And so when we ask folks, or young people in particular, right, when we call on them and put them on the spot, bring them to the front of the room, whoa, that could be really harmful. And I'm saying that as a young person who was really harmed that way so many times. It took a lot of therapy for me to find my voice. How do you best receive feedback? Critical question. And again, ask yourself this, ask the folks that you work with this question, because it's different for everyone. Yeah, there will absolutely be times where we have to say, hey, this thing happened. I'd like to talk about it. But should we be doing that in front of everybody? No, not unless that person says, oh, I actually really appreciate community accountability. That feels so good to me. I love that. And the same thing for praise. You did a great job on this thing. Ah, I'm shy. Don't say that in front of everybody. Just tell me privately. Send me an email. So really getting to know the folks that you work with is really how we start to create this environment. What is helpful for you when navigating conflict and harm? Being a human, I was going to say working with young people, but the reality is being a human, we're going to have to navigate harm and we're going to have to navigate conflict. These things happen. It is a part of life, right? And so we have to, I'm going to use this word, but I hate using this word. We have to normalize this notion, right? That, yeah, we're not always going to get it right. Sometimes I may hurt your feelings. Sometimes you may hurt my feelings. Just because I'm the adult in this space does not mean that like you cutting ass on me like doesn't hurt, right? And that's okay, but we need to come to this place of saying it's going to happen. How do we get through it? It's not how do we avoid it? It's not how do we pass it aside? It's going to happen. How do we get through it together? In the same way that when you have a partner, a relationship, a parent, or whatever, my mom yells at me. It's going to happen. Okay, I'm going to have feelings about it. How do we get through it? I'm not going to completely write her off. I'm not going to like never speak to my mother again. How are we going to get through it? So when you hold space for young people, you are modeling all of this for them. In a world that tells them that relationships don't really matter that much because everybody's replaceable, right? Everybody can be replaced. I don't need you, blah, blah, blah. Fair. Absolutely. Sure. There's so many amazing things that we can experience. And do we always have to throw everything out? No. No. The only way to come to that understanding is to do this, to decide what does conflict navigation look like and feel like for you. And then how can I affirm your identities or your experience? You do not have to, it's not, I didn't use the word understand, right? I want to be clear about this, especially when you work with neurodivergent, disabled or queer youth. Nobody's asking you to understand them. You don't need to. If you haven't read The Body Isn't an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor, please read it. She does a fantastic job of explaining why understanding is so overrated. Understanding doesn't make sense. I just need you to be at peace with who I am. You don't need to understand why I show up this way, who I am, and how I became this person. You don't need to know all my trauma. Calm down. But you do need to know how to affirm my identities as a queer person, as a young person, right? And you do need to know how to affirm my experience. If I say this thing hurt, it is not for anybody else to say that didn't hurt. They didn't mean that. No. But how can I affirm that you experienced that? I hear you. That sounds really hard. I'm sorry that that happened to you. So my 3 pillars of a thriving environment are, remember, safe, supported, and held, okay? So I'm gonna break down what does safety look like, what does support look like, and then what does being held look like. So safety in particular, time check, okay. Safety in particular looks like the person or the people in that space knowing that they're safe to do the thing or to not do the thing. And by that, I mean something that you told them. So as a sex educator, of course, I'm talking about safe sex, right? I'm like, hey, everybody, we want to get tested. We want to disclose our status. We want to talk about treatment. We want to talk about protective barriers. We want to do all of that. And I'm also actively saying, yo, I get it. Sometimes shit just happens. I get it. My sister was a teen mom. How would I look if I entered a space shaming other young parents? No way. And so when I talk about safety, it is that I know as a young person in your space that yes, I can choose to do the thing that you have helped me to understand, or I could not do that. And I know that you are not going to dismiss me. You're not going to write me off. You're not going to call me a bad kid because I didn't do the thing. Safety also looks like being able to disagree with you. Being able to disagree with you, adults. Yes, we are not always going to get it right. We are not always going to get it right. And so we create safety where we actually name like, hey, yeah, you might disagree with what I said. And I welcome that. I absolutely welcome that. Safety also looks like being able to come to you, come to this space and say, hey, you know, that thing we talked about not doing, I did it. I messed up a little bit. And here are my feelings about it. Right. And so in that safe container, You're not combating and you're not saying, why did you do this thing? I gave you all of the material. I gave you all the data. Why did you do this? But instead, it's just the normalizing. Again, I hate that word, but it's the normalizing of, yeah, life happens. Contrast happens. Contrast is a term that I'm using in place of mistakes, right? Or I did the wrong thing. But contrast happens. And so when we can just name this, most of this is literally just saying it out loud. That's it. That's the whole session, everyone. Like, you can go now. Most of it is just communicating this out loud, saying it with your chest, right? To the folks that you are in relationship and community with. Like, yeah, I want you to feel safe. And so that means that you may have to tell me that I fucked up. You may have to tell me that you did a thing that you think I'm not going to be happy with. But ultimately, I'm happy that you came to me. I'm happy that you're here, that you're still alive, that you're in the space. I'm just happy that you are you. That is safety, when they are not worried about disappointing you. Support, again, this is just language that we use, right? And so we just keep using it. I'm with you. Whatever you decide, I'm right here with you. I am right here with you. No, I don't understand it, right? I don't get it. I work with young people all the time. Do I understand everything that they do? I have young people in my life, in my family, who I love dearly. Do I understand them all? Absolutely not. But you know what? I'm there to support them. Whatever they decide, I'm there to support them. And support looks different for every person, right? So again, you want to do that intentional relationship building. What does support look like for you? Some days it may just be, I just need to talk and vent, and I don't want you to say anything back. I just want to let it all out and word vomit, right? And that's beautiful. That's support. Some days it may be like, honestly, I just need to take a nap on your sofa for a minute, right? And so support is go do your thing, whatever you decide, I'm here, I'm giving you this space, and you're so valid in whatever you do with this space. So finding ways to just continue to uplift and affirm those experiences. This is not about me. This is not about what the program wants for you. This is literally just about you. You're valid. This is your experience. Do your thing. And I'm here along the way should you want me to be. That's it. Held. Okay, so physically is not what I'm talking about. I'm not saying to physically hold a person. I know that many spaces don't even allow that, right? Like sometimes a young person will be like, I would love a hug. And we're just like, I can't legally, sorry, can't do that for you. So I'm not saying to cross any boundaries like that. But held speaks to the container, right? To the invitation for them to take up space, to voice their concerns, to voice their problems, take up all the space. And then so that they know they're held when the thing is happening, right? So let's say I'm deciding to have sex with someone for the first time. And I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, okay, it's happening, right? It's happening. And so I go to my educator, I go to the person who is, you know, the adult, the authority figure in this space, and I say, hey, this thing is happening. It's happening, it's happening. You could shame me. You could say, don't do this thing. You're too young. You're being irresponsible, blah, blah, blah. Or you could say, how can I support you? And that is containment, right? Not negating the experience, not pushing your desires on the experience, but really just saying, how can I support you through it? I see that the thing is happening. What you need? Sometimes they'll come to us after and they'll say, the thing is done. The thing is done. I did it. It's done. I'm freaking out. I've had feelings. And guess what? That's okay. I'm here to hold those feelings. I'm not here to physically hold the person, but I'm here to hold space for those feelings, right? Without saying anything that is attached to my ego, without saying anything that is trying to negate or undermine your experience, really just to say, take up space. I got you. I'm here. That's it. So nurturing is ongoing, it is accountable, and it is intentional. As I mentioned before, you've got to integrate the things that you learn, right? So we're asking the questions, we're getting the information, we're getting to know the people that we work with, the people that we're in community with. We don't just leave it there. We don't just leave it in like a, you know, the anonymous suggestion boxes or whatever. We don't just leave it there. We have to actively integrate the things. And I say this knowing that not all of us have the, what's that word? The decision-making power that we wish we had within our respective agencies, right? I know that not everyone here is the person who is in charge of funding to decide, yeah, we're going to throw a pizza party for everybody. Absolutely. I would love to feed the whole world. I get it, right? But as the adult, you are still advocating for some type of integration of the information that you've gathered. It's not just to leave it there. And that also means, excuse me, that also means being transparent. So maybe you've done the work of getting the information and you've tried to integrate it, and the powers that be said, no, dub. Okay. So when I talk about transparency and vulnerability, that means naming it to the folks that you work with, naming it to the young people. Hey, I tried. I really wanted, I did do the advocating, but it's just not possible right now. You don't have to throw anybody under the bus unless you want to. You don't have to do anything like that. You just want to acknowledge, like, you gave me this information. I did the most that I could within my positionality with this information. And right now it's not possible. You attempted, right? And you're still speaking to the relationship that you're building, because now your community, those young people know, like, yo, okay, I'm not always going to get my way. Absolutely. That's the way the world works, right? But I have a person who actually listened and advocated for me. I feel really good here. I feel safe. I feel supported. I feel held. My other suggestions for nurturing the environment, when I first started using dating apps like Tinder and all that stuff, I could not figure out why people put so much information, like their passions, their likes, dislikes. I mean, just so much stuff. I was like, why don't we just get to know each other and then we'll talk about this stuff? But I figured it out. It's because why waste your time? Why waste your time? Why waste your time? This, right, publicly declaring what you are about, what you are down to do and not do, speaks to the ease with which we can find ourselves in relationship and alignment together. So if I'm in a classroom, one of the first things that I say is the things that I value. So I value hearing from young people. I want to hear from you more than I want to do the talking, to be honest with you, right? And so being able to name these things, again, makes it easier for young people and anybody that we're in relationship to feel comfortable with, right? Where you don't have to wonder, like, damn, is this teacher, is this social worker going to tell me that I'm bugging because I felt a microaggression this morning from my white teacher? Damn, I don't even want to bother. This is why I don't talk, because why bother? Nobody's going to believe me anyway. But if you come in and you say the things, or you use decorations, or you've got flags, you got all this amazing stuff going on, right? Again, it makes it easier. We don't have to do as much work. We can rest our shoulders a little bit and breathe. We can say, okay, Black Lives Matter to this person, bet. Boom, okay, good. I don't have to wonder if they understand systemic racism, right? Because they've told me, they are coming in already with that information and saying, yo, this thing happened, let's talk about it. So that's what I mean by declare the things that you stand for, man. Like, really stand for that. You got to say it with your chest sometimes, and there's no other way around it. For those of us who are also educators, or who find ourselves bringing in, speakers, books, literature, all that stuff, you want to be really cautious and check your sources. And what I mean by that is, who are you bringing in? What communities do they identify with? And how does that align with the community of people that you work with, right? So if I'm working specifically with queer BIPOC youth, I'm not going to only bring in straight cis white speakers or presenters or literature, right? Like, we're not only going to read Shakespeare because what? I don't understand, right? There's too much out there. There are too many amazing people, amazing talents, creativity, amazing voices for us to continue limiting what we show folks we have access to. So consider who your speakers are, your experts, your trainers, who wrote your curriculum, who's checking your grants, right? All of this stuff matters. Every single thing that we do here in this space matters. I am a big fan of community affirmations over, what's the thing? Community rules, guidelines, I think that rules and guidelines are a thing, sure, absolutely, but they don't speak to the feeling, right? Remember, I told you I'm all about the feels, but they don't speak to the feeling, right? So if I say one mic, all right, cool, whatevs, one person talks at a time, that is very different, right? From us coming together and saying, yeah, we deserve to feel heard by our peers and our teachers. We deserve that. We deserve to feel heard. Is very different from one mic. So really being intentional, using the language that is going directly to the feeling, to the experience that you want to create for yourself and for the folks that you're in community with, and for your young people. So we know and feel safe to mess up and get things wrong. Yeah, absolutely. Because you can say it, right? Like you can say it, but it's different again when you have this agreement, right? When you are sharing this with other people in space, when you yourself as the adult, the teacher, the learner, you say, I messed up. I messed up. I did this thing that I didn't mean to do, or that has had significant impact in this way, right? And so we normalize really the feelings. We're normalizing and naturalizing the feeling and the experience in the space and with those that we work with over behavior, right? Over one mic, over respect. Because again, those things may mean different things to everybody. But what is the same is that we all deserve to feel heard. We all deserve to feel heard in this space. So nurtured engagement. We want to really do our best to understand learning styles, right? So asking that intentional question. As a neurodivergent person, yo, it's really hard for me to pay attention if I don't have visual aids. I try so hard. I try to do like the podcasts. I mean, even the TED Talks. I try to do all of that. And my brain is just like, no, absolutely not. And so learning how they learn, right? Learning how you learn as well is super helpful. Bringing in audio only or visual aids, bringing in sensory toys, right? And I'm using toys in quotations because really these are tools. These are tools. When I have Play-Doh or silly putty, woo, first of all, the art that young people can make with this stuff, beautiful, but more so the engagement, right? Because they feel that safety, that creativity to do the thing, and still they have that ability to listen and receive when they are in the space too. 360, so 360 degrees is the whole approach here, y'all. It's the whole thing. Restorative processes have to apply to you, to your supervisor, to everybody else. We cannot say, oh, I want, I expect that these young people will name when they've been harmed in a situation. But what if you're the one who's harmed them? You got to be ready to hold that. You got to be ready to hold that. 360 degrees. A nurturing environment is not just for the learner. It's not just for the adult. It is 360, baby. We are doing this together. It is collaborative, okay? And that also includes your authenticity. I mean, stop letting the world tell you that you can't be who you are in this space and have an impact, because you can. Especially for those of us who work with communities that we are a part of, bring in your authentic self, please. And in the spaces that, or in the ways that you feel that you can't, make that a conversation. Let's talk about professionalism. What do you think that means? How do you think that impacts how we show up to work? Say it. You want to say and affirm again and again and again and again. Young people have power. Young people are experts. Young people have power, and young people are experts. Okay. And if you disagree with that, I don't know what to tell you. There's another slide that we'll talk through. But to be honest, I'm not great at technology. And shout out to young people who have shown me everything that I know, because they're experts at it. I'm not saying that we have to say that they are experts in sociology. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. But to deny that they are experts in their lived experience is wrong. That's wrong. Communicate. You as this is again, you, the adult, the educator, the person in the front of the room, in the front of the screen, right? You want to name your own feelings and experiences. You want to allow youth to name theirs. And so we're detaching from this right or wrong model, okay? You feel this way, well, that's wrong because I didn't mean it that way, or because it didn't happen that way. Your experience is your experience. My experience is my experience. So in a nurturing environment, we have space for all of the experiences without having to negate and combat one another. I cannot tell you how many times this has saved a relationship, or like in a moment of conflict, right? Where, oh, but it felt this way to me. And someone else says, but it felt this way to me. Real, that's valid. That's valid. How am I going to negate what it felt like to you? It doesn't make sense. The math doesn't math like that. I don't know what it was to you. I can only listen, or not understand, but I can only listen and affirm and say, I hear you. I hear you. Maybe it's different from what I felt, and that's okay. It's not right or wrong, because we're moving through this together. It's not me versus you. We're doing this together. And then we want to reflect, right? So I hear you. That makes so much sense. Let's do some journaling about that. Reflection doesn't only mean that we're saying the things back. It also means that we're integrating active time for folks to reflect themselves. And so if we don't want to do the verbal processing, or maybe we just don't have the capacity or the time to do the verbal processing, that can look like doing journaling prompts, right? So this thing happened, how did you feel? Just give them like a 30-second, literally 30 seconds, just to free write on the thing that's happened or the thing that may be coming up. But that is teaching them to get in tune with themselves, to come into awareness with themselves. So what I'm offering here is less about what the program wants, right? Like, you know, you have deliverables, you got all that stuff, sure, absolutely. But really, I'm offering a way for all of us, learners, teachers, educators, adults, young people, everyone, to come into further relationship and awareness with themselves. That is a nurturing environment. So as I said, young people do have power. Young people are experts. And so I'm gonna just quickly highlight a couple of different advocacy movements and activism, moments of activism led by young people that have really impacted the world as we know it, okay? And this is super important because a lot of the times folks in sessions like this, they'll say, well, I don't really get it. Like, I don't know, what have young people done? I don't really get it. Like, how am I going to affirm that they're experts or that they have power if I don't know the thing? Fair, totally fair. So you're gonna have 6 little boxes here, but I want to note that there's way more. There's so much that young people have done. Oh my goodness, do the research because it is eye-opening. And this is what we can bring into the space, right? Because those young people may also doubt that they have power. They may also doubt their ability to change their relationship, change the world, right? And so when we come in and we say, here's what I learned. Look at all this cool shit young people have done. Right? They no longer have to wonder because they're actually seeing it, and they're seeing it by an adult who's bringing this in. An adult is saying, yo, look at how these young people change the world. That's powerful. So through the 18th and 19th centuries, many abolitionists throughout the Underground Railroad were young people, like teens. In 1917, at the Texas-Mexico border, there was a policy where Mexican folks coming into Texas had to go through gasoline baths. And it's exactly what it sounds like. They were sprayed with a hose with chemicals to clean them before they entered into the United States. Until a young person said, fuck that. And a riot began. And now that's not a practice anymore. A young person started that. 1963, we have the Children's March in Birmingham, Alabama. Young people led that. Young people led this uprising against segregation. 2010, we have the DREAM Act. We have the Dreamers. That was largely pushed by young people. 2015, we started to see young people, teens, suing the United States government over climate change. What's the Greta Thunberg? Killing it, right? And not just Greta. I want to also name that there are a shit ton of BIPOC youth activists and environmentalists that are doing the same thing, but just don't have the same platform. So even 2016, Standing Rock, that was young people. That was young people, all of this. And this is just like the tip of the iceberg. So the world may say that they're not actually experts, that they don't have power, but we know better. We know better. Look at what they've done. And they will continue to do this. They will continue to change the fucking world. So an affirmative environment is just, it's authentic, it's accountable, it's adaptable, right? We know that things are not always going to be the same. Things are not always going to look the way that they looked yesterday, and that's okay. We're not always going to be able to abide exactly by the curriculum and get through everything because sometimes something comes up and we got to address that. It is acknowledging, I hear you, I see you. Yeah, that's real, that's so valid. It is approving, and I'm not saying approving and like, tell them they're right at everything that they do. That's not what I mean, but approving in their existence. I see you, I hear you, I'm holding space for you. There's nothing wrong with who you are as a person, my love. Nothing. You belong here. Please take up all of the space. And that's it. That is my guide to creating a nurturing and thriving environment for young people, but really for all people. So I have 8 minutes for Q&A if folks want to utilize any of the chat boxes. I have some trainings coming up. So I do sex ed the way that I do sex ed. So I have sessions coming up on how to queer your curriculum, how to queer prevention, how do we decolonize gender, how do we integrate emotional consciousness through sex education, and how do we really celebrate youth expertise and advocacy. So you can find all that information on my site, and here's a 15% off code for you all. So feel free to take a picture, or if you just want to request a copy of my slides, I'm here. You can follow me on Instagram. I love to talk shit on Instagram. Let's be friends. Let's do all the things. But I am now going to stop talking so I can just look at the chat and get some questions. Can you share a time where you have been checked by youth? All the time? So many times. Let's see. So I'll go with the example that I brought in the beginning, the Post-it, right? The Post-it that said, "This shit blows fiercely." I was leading a class on sexual health, and all we talked about were STIs. It was arguably the most stigmatizing lesson that I've ever taught till this day. There was no mention of pleasure, no mention of anything other than the horrific things that could come from sex. God. Mind you, at the time, I would say like 75% of the young people in there were already sexually active. So I was doing not great, you know? And my, excuses, I'm following the curriculum, blah, blah, blah. Young people don't give a fuck about that. They don't give a fuck about that. So this shit blows fiercely was their way of communicating to me, like, this is not true of the sex that I have. This is not true of the sex that I want to have. This is not true of my life or my experience. And so I had to check myself. I had to check the curriculum. And then I had to bring that to the powers that be, right? And say, listen, we actually have to start talking about pleasure and not just telling folks that they're going to like fucking stop existing as a healthy human being if they decide to have sex at what we determine to be a young age. This is not helpful. They're actively disengaging from the content, and they're disengaging from me as a trusted source. This is not how we build a nurturing environment, you know? Thank you for that question, April. For the end, do you have any advice for when other adults go against your efforts to create thriving spaces in classroom sessions? I often have teachers contradict my group agreements, which include that they can put their head down, draw, or even step out, like teachers waking them up, telling them to put notebooks away, etc. Yeah, absolutely. So if you shoot me an email, I can send you my resource guide. I'm not a big data person, but I understand that a lot of the world relies on data. So I do have studies that actively show that young people are actively learning even when they're physically, body language wise, disengaged, what we consider to be disengaged, right? And so that is a conversation. You can go in with the data and say, hey, look, it's true, it's happening. They're learning, they're still getting the material. We just don't like the way that it feels for us. So depending on who you work with, you could go just the data route and say, like, here, the numbers are speaking for themselves. Like, we can do this thing and we can allow these young people to show up how they need to. Or you can challenge. You can challenge and say, okay, well, let's talk about that, right? How do you know that they're not learning? How do you know that they didn't get the sleep that they needed last night? And this is the only space that they feel safe enough to lay their head down. What is so important about this one lesson that we won't allow this young person to rest when they are in need of rest? Because the reality is, and the data shows, when we are exhausted or when most of our survival needs are not met, we're not able to retain the information anyway. It's performativity. That's what you're asking for. It's performativity. That's really it. Thanks for that question, Alex. Great. All right, folks, it doesn't look like there's any more questions coming in. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for the vulnerability that it takes to show up in any learning space. Any learning space, I do not care how old we are, what the space is, it takes vulnerability to admit and to say internally or externally, I don't know enough about this thing, I want to learn more. So thank you all, and I really deeply hope that you apply this to yourself first, get to know yourself better. Please, you deserve it. You deserve to take up all the space. You deserve to take up all the space. Let's do it together. Thank you.